Hello, everyone. This is Eric Pennington, and welcome to the Spirit of EQ podcast. We're glad that you've tuned in. A few things we wanted to tell you at the beginning of the show, and that's this podcast was created to be a tool to help you, primarily to discover and grow your EQ. Science and our own lived experiences confirm that the better we are at managing our emotions, the better we're going to be at making decisions, which leads to a better life. And that's something we all want. We're glad that you've taken out the time today to listen and hope that something that you hear will lead to a breakthrough. Hey, one last thing. We'd really appreciate a review on whichever platform you use to listen. And if you want to, leave some comments about what you heard today, as well as follow and subscribe. That way you won't miss a single episode as we continue this journey. And with that, the show begins.
Lyndall Farley, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here.
I am too. And one of the things that I've thought about prior to us recording today was our conversations back about a month ago. And for our audience, I will just tell everyone out there that Lyndall caught my attention. It's almost been 2 years ago, with this idea of being a sabbatical coach. Being that I kind of strive on the unique, I started thinking to myself, oh my gosh, a sabbatical coach, that's interesting. And I may have it wrong, Lyndall. I don't know if you reached out to me or I reached out to you, but either way, I wanted to learn more. And I'm super excited that you're here to tell our audience a bit about your work and what it's all involved. So, can we start with, could you tell our audience, what is sabbatical and how do you reference it? How do you use it? What is it all about?
Yeah, and that's such a great place to start. Thank you so much for starting there, Eric, because there's a lot of confusion around this term sabbatical, and there's lots of different words flying around, particularly now as they're becoming more popular. But the sort of generally accepted definition of a sabbatical is that it is an extended break from work for the intention of pursuing other interests, right? So let's break that down. So an extended break from work, that's, longer than vacation. Right. So typically a few months, it can be, up to a year. We're talking a really long break away from work. But then we're also talking about the fact that it's an intentional time where you get to pursue other interests. And that sets it apart from, career breaks or other reasons that people are out of the workforce, like raising a family or, for a health reason, right? Because it's around you having the intention to pursue other activities, but also that you have the control and the ability to go and pursue those activities, right? So it really brings a sabbatical back to the length of time. So it's a long time away from work, and it's an intentional break where you get to do what you want, all your dreams can come true.
I've heard that before.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So when you describe this a long time, is there a typical time frame for a sabbatical, or can it be just depending on the person, the situation, and all of that?
Yeah, there's a lot of differences in the length of time that people take. And I think there's another nuance here as well, is around whether it is company supported or not supported by your company. So if, some very lucky people, and increasingly so, their companies offer a sabbatical, and that this might be paid in for super lucky people,
right.
For most cases, it's unpaid, right? And so if it's a company-supported sabbatical, they do tend to be shorter in duration. So 1 to 3 months, sometimes 6 months, right? And then there's a sabbatical that's not supported by a company, that you just decide to resign, take a break from work altogether, and then it's completely up to you as to how long that sabbatical.
Okay, that's interesting, and I'm kind of looking at it through the lens of 2024. So there's a lot of variance in what you said there, but maybe if you could, considering 2024, and in the United States, it's an election year, and I don't mean it that way. I mean just in current day form. Can you maybe share with the audience what maybe an example of what a sabbatical might be? What would be something, or if you could describe a story of someone that maybe you've worked with who took one, just maybe as a real life story?
Yeah. So I'd love to tell the story piece. Let's do that. But first, I think there's a really important context around what you were talking about with it being in 2024. So like today, right? And there's sort of a past and a now kind of narrative on this. And the past is really before the pandemic, and the now is sort of after the pandemic. So we know that, the pandemic had a huge impact on people, but we had sort of that collective moment to go, what am I doing? And really kind of, reset and kind of reflect and go, okay, what is it that I want to be doing next, right? Yeah. And how do I really want to live my life, and what's important to me, right? So at the same time, we've also had over the years increasing burnout. You've got, post the pandemic, we had the phenomena of, the Great Resignation, and then there was quitting, and there's all of these kinds of factors that are leading into people wanting to now take a break from work. Right. And so whether that's, a career break, a sabbatical, whatever, a golden gap year, a mini retirement, whatever you want to call it, people are taking these breaks now more after the pandemic than they did before. Right.
So
there's been a massive uptick in people taking sabbaticals. And actually, also, there's been a 61% increase in the number of companies offering a sabbatical since the global pandemic. So it's just a trend that is sort of, coming to pass now. It's really kind of stepping into its own. And that is because people sort of woke up and decided that they wanted to do something different, but also that they're on the path to burnout, and, they really needed to make some changes. And that involved taking a step back, taking a break, reflecting, and then reimagining their next step.
What's interesting, Lyndall, as you've mentioned that, and I just got to thinking, and what I'm about to say, I don't want to minimize the impact of the pandemic, because it was big. I mean, across many fronts. However, I'm the kind of person that I try to find something positive, something that is redeeming, even in something that's really bad, right? Yeah. Could it be that maybe the pandemic helped sort of birth a more accepting approach to this?
100%. I think it was a huge silver lining of the coronavirus and the pandemic, was that it just gave us this collective moment to stop and rethink.
Right.
And just reflect on what's important. There's nothing like being confronted with mortality to make people think about where they're going and just get off that hamster wheel for a moment,
Yeah.
And so, I think that was a huge silver lining. I actually, I have no data to support this, Eric, but I actually think that it brought the concept of sabbaticals further forward, or accelerated their adoption by about 5 years, 5 to 10 years. I think it really I think we would have got there anyway. I don't think it's because of the coronavirus, but I really think it gave us an accelerator towards the acceptance of sabbaticals.
That's such a great insight. Because I think a lot of things, and I've heard that kind of statement in regards to other subjects, that it was already on its way, but the pandemic, as you put it, accelerated the adoption, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of it's the two-sided coin. On one hand, it was a global pandemic, but on the other hand, I mean, yeah, if you told me sabbaticals are going to be a more acceptable, more accepted norm, I'd say that's a good thing, without a doubt. So, what if somebody said, okay, so if I do this sabbatical thing, Lyndall, what are some of the benefits that come to me by doing that? And I know there's the obvious ones. You get time to reflect, to determine what you want to do next. But are there other benefits to a sabbatical?
Yeah, well, how about I answer that by also answering your prompt around the story, right? So I'll answer that in real life story form.
Perfect.
So let's take one of my clients, right?
Yep.
My clients are confidential, so
understood. No doubt.
Identifying features.
Right.
But he was a guy who was in the middle of his career, had absolutely reached a lot of success in his career, had gone and done the Ivy League, MBA, and he was really successful, but at the same time kind of floundering, just not really sure what he wanted to do anymore. Certainly was not happy, not thriving at all in work, right?
Right.
And came to me, was very I guess burnt out, a bit depressed, and a bit lost. And we crafted some sabbatical plan for him that felt like it was structured or had enough structure in it, but then also enough time to sort of just have the freedom and flexibility to follow opportunity and take advantage of serendipity, right?
Right.
And he didn't have any big plans to travel the world or do anything like that. He really just wanted to, lean into exploring concepts like philosophy and language and things like that, right? At the same time, he and his wife were considering starting a family, right? And he also was kind of confronting, what's this going to mean for the next chapter of my life? I'm ready to become a dad, like lots of those kinds of things were coming up too. And so he took a sabbatical, and it was sort of like this gentle unfolding, a lot of kind of unfolding of that workplace stress, a lot of self-acceptance for who he was and who he was becoming. Also a building back up of confidence, and also a chance to connect with his family, And so the first part of the sabbatical was really what I call decompression, really kind of getting off the hamster wheel, but
right.
Having the time to just sort of go and just sort of return to self, just to a grounded, calm, confident sense of self, right?
Right.
And then from there, he was out doing amazing things. I'm trying to remember. I think he really got into pickleball. Yeah, I think he really got into pickleball. And
interesting.
Oh no, it was what's that frisbee game? But you do it like over distance.
As you say that, Lyndall, I know what you're talking about. I can't remember the name of it though.
It was that thing. I hadn't ever heard of it, but yeah, it was whatever that thing is called.
Yeah.
And got really into that. But we also went through, because he had the time and the confidence and the energy back, we started going through a life design process where we were kind of designing for him, what is the next chapter look like for you, What's it going to be like to be a dad, And then importantly, towards the end of the sabbatical, when he really started to feel ready to return to work, he was, looking for a new job, but, he had, while we did the life design work, he got super clear on what was important to him. And what was important was like balance and having boundaries with work, right? So initially he was like, oh, maybe I need to completely throw my career out the window and do something totally different. But through that gentle unfolding in the sabbatical, he realized, actually, no, I really like this career. There's nothing wrong with the career. It's just the way I was working and the company I was working in. So if I can find another role in a more positive environment and, I can have better relationship with work myself, then, I'm happy I want to keep pursuing this career, and that's what he found. I mean, like literally I think it was the first job he interviewed for. And he got the role, and it was a company. It was almost like he was interviewing the company as well, right? Because he knew what his boundaries were and he knew what he wanted in the role. And he was able to really craft that for himself. And he's still at that company, and he became a dad.
Oh, wow. And a happy part ending, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Gosh. If I had to pick out anything from that story that I could lay out as a benefit, when you mentioned about him interviewing the company, that comes when that self-knowledge level is really been discovered and is high, right? Because you're no longer on the end of, and I'm just using my language and my description, you're not the beggar just hoping that somebody will choose you. You're an equal. You're able to look at it through that lens. And there's so many people, Lyndall, who don't understand that they have that power. And I'm being gentle and grace giving to them, that in the end, they may not know that they have it. And boom, another benefit of a sabbatical, the ability to kind of look at things in a different way, to discover you again, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if we sort of mine that story for all of its benefits, right?
Yeah.
At the very beginning, there's permission giving around, I need to stop, I need to recharge, I need to do something different, right? Yeah. And then there's that really psychological and physical recovery, and that doesn't, like, you go through that decompression period, regardless of whether you're burnt out. It will just take longer if you're burnt out. But everybody has to transition their pace from the frenetic pace of working life as we live it today down to that more healthy sabbatical kind of pace, right? And that's a unique pace for that individual, right? But so the benefit of just going through that decompression is a huge benefit, right? And then that returning to self, like I call it, this benefit of like finding my mojo again. I mean, how many people out there feel like they're just kind of like a robot on autopilot now? And we're not really very connected to who we are and what we want sometimes. It's so easy to lose connection to that. So, sabbatical gig can get you connected again to that. And then it's this huge opportunity to figure out what's next, so.
Yeah. And, as I'm thinking, as you're saying that, and I do want to touch on it during our time together about, that there's more than one type of sabbatical, right? There's not always has to be this big chunk of time. But before I go there, I'm thinking of that audience member who might be saying, well, Lyndall, hey, that guy is an Ivy League educated captain of industry, makes lots of money, and he can afford to do that. I'm just an analyst for a large bank. They won't do that for me, and I don't have that kind of money. I can't. So maybe that's the segue into, what do you say to those folks, right, who maybe legitimately are in that place, right? Are there other ways of getting to this sabbatical and getting to those benefits?
Yeah, I think there's absolutely an acknowledgement here that taking a sabbatical is a privilege. There is a large portion of the economy who are living paycheck to paycheck or below the poverty line, where, this privilege is not available to them, right?
Right.
Having said that, there is also a large portion of the economy who think that it is not available to them.
Mm-hmm.
But if they think a little bit strategically about it, it absolutely can be, right? So let's talk to those people right now.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Because now we've segmented a little bit. So I think to those people, it's really about being a bit strategic in how and when you do it, but also planning it ahead of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you're not going to take off a year, right? But maybe you can take off 3 months, right? So this is the kind of, I don't know, thought experiment challenge I like to give people, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I told you, and we'll just pretend you're one of these people, Eric. Okay?
All right. Okay. I like it.
If I told you, Eric, that 2 years from now, you have to take 3 months off work, your life actually depends on it. Like you have to work out a way to take 3 months off work, but you've got 2 years to prepare for that. What would you do?
Very interesting. And as I'm thinking about it, I would begin to, well, first I would talk to my family and I would say, this is coming. It's not tomorrow, but we need to start thinking differently for the purposes of that. Then I probably would move to business stakeholders, partners, and to let them know that we need to start developing a plan of what and how we're going to handle X, Y, and Z, because coming in 2 years, I'm going to, as you just said, because my life depends on it. And this would also, Lyndall, it's an advertisement about why it's so important to build strong connections and relationships, right? Kind of off the, but it's really connected, because those support networks are the ones that are going to help. Because I think in my mind, and I'm guilty of doing it, I'm getting better, right? Of just going, oh, well, Lyndall, that's not a problem. I'll be ready and I'm ready to go. And when it happens, I'm there and I'm going to be committed. And I've got all these things in my head that tell me I'm ready. But the reality is life will deliver surprises.
Yeah.
Life will deliver, fill in the blank. And I guess that support network is where I would go to begin the preparation for that. That would be that's a long-winded way around to what you asked.
Yeah, and that is such a great way of answering it, right? So the first response that you had is, well, let's think beyond just me. Let's use the support that's around me. So that's a fantastic strategy, right? And people listening to this can use a similar strategy. Everybody has people that can support them, right?
And by the way, Lyndall, I have scars to show for doing it a different way, which is I'm going to do this and get out of my way.
Yes.
You can't tell me.
So the scary thing is that whilst I gave you your life depends on it kind of, scenario, this can happen to anyone at any time. I mean, all you have to have is something unexpected happen in life, a health scare, whatever it might be, and you have to take 3 months off work, right? But the difference is here, you get hit by a bus, you got no warning, no preparation, and you just have to make it work, right? The difference with the sabbatical is you got 2 years, 3 years, 5 years to prepare, right? So, in the same way that you've got to trust yourself to know that you would make your way through if you were hit with something that was unfortunate in life. You can trust yourself that if you put the right, and here's the kicker word, priority on taking a sabbatical 2 years in the future, that you can also make that happen.
Jeff, what is the SEQ Development Report?
I'm glad you asked me that, Eric. The SEQ development report is something that we here at Spirit of EQ have developed to blend the idea of emotional intelligence with a person's spiritual life. And we're not talking about religion, we're talking about how they connect with themselves, other people, and the world around them.
Why is it important?
I think it's important because it allows someone to see where they stand, to give them information about maybe parts of their life they may need to work on, parts of their life that they're really doing well and learn to leverage it. And it just gives a person a better way of getting through the world.
So how do you get this report?
Well, first, you need to contact us. Info at Spirit of EQ is just a great way to do it. Then you would take an assessment, 15, 20 minutes, done online. And then after that, the report requires a debrief to go through all the things in it because it's got a ton of information. And then if you want to further your journey, we can do coaching and things like that with you down the road. And that's basically it.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff. And now back to the episode. And we'll be back to the episode after this.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think about, Lyndall, is this idea of, okay, I want something different. And I'm going to go back to the pandemic. And just from a personal perspective, it made me look around. It made me question. I ask questions like, is this really the way I want to live? Is it? And I'm almost thinking, I would say to that person out there in the audience is not asking you to go to the loss that maybe you experienced or the negative outcomes and all that stuff, but just go to the positive of what was your mindset like? What did you reflect on? What did you question? And maybe use that mindset to help propel you toward a sabbatical, right?
Yeah.
And I almost think as we're talking, Lyndall, it's not a question of if we should take a sabbatical. It's a question of when. And you know what I mean?
Yes, I 100% fully agree. I mean, come on, Eric, I've taken 11. I told you.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But I mean, for me, it's a way of life now because that's something that I realized quite early in my career. As an adult, that I wanted to take these. I didn't want to just work my whole life. I wanted to go out and live a big life. And that involved doing things outside of work, volunteering, traveling, being an entrepreneur, all of these different things that I've had as big goals and bucket list items for myself needed time away from work, right? So
yeah. Do you think in some ways, and I guess as I think about it, then maybe we've allowed work to occupy more of our souls than we should?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm battling that on a daily basis. The fact that work has completely overtaken our life as, the purpose of life is not to work, and yet we act like it is.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting when you say that? And I might have said this to you when we talked a month ago. I have someone, he's an entrepreneur. I'm trying to get him on the show, but it's like, I got to find a way to just like maybe kidnap him for an hour. But his story is so powerful. And I think this is maybe the worst kept secret inside of, and I'll speak about the United States. He was on fire to start this company, and he did. And it became what we would maybe identify as being very successful. And then he found that he was bored. He found himself disillusioned. And Lyndall, he said to me, it's because I thought that this work would validate me. Yeah. That's what he was searching for, was validation.
Yeah.
The reality of it, and he readily opened up about this, is that it did not validate at all. And it kind of made me realize that the pursuit of this was really kind of how did he put it? He might have said something to the effect, and I'm trying to remember. It was like almost a meaningless pursuit. He didn't like say, well, I'm going to sell my company and I'm going to go live on an island and I'm not going to do work, because he didn't go to the extremes, but he realigned himself toward finding validation where it belongs. And it's not the fault of the work. It's not the fault of the corporation. No. It's really kind of, I mean, I don't want to get too deep in the psychological, but it lies within us.
Yeah. And I think there's a really big and important distinction that it's important to do and find purposeful work, right?
Yeah.
But working is not the purpose of your life, right? And so
well said.
Like niched with purpose within purpose, right? There's got to be something bigger than work that is going to be filling up your purpose bucket. And a lot of people find that in family and in relationships and a sense of a community or belonging. People find it in spirituality. People find it in, altruistic kinds of virtuous, things that they're doing. But, it's the old saying that your job's not going to be there on your deathbed. Who's going to be there holding your hand? Not your job.
Well, it's interesting. I think back to my corporate career, and when I was in the midst of it, I mean, I had numbers of people around me smiling, applauding, all of the above. And I say that to say also they were well-intentioned. But the revelation that came when I was kicked out for the last time, I probably didn't hear more than 2 people who like continually, consistently reached out to me. Just the, how are you doing? How are things going? I mean, when you realize that, again, it's not an indictment of the company. It's not an indictment of the people that I worked with.
Yeah.
It's just that place, that thing cannot hold the weight of your soul. So maybe the pivot is stop giving that much of your soul to it.
Yeah. And I think there's also a lack of security and certainty in the employment relationship these days that has also accelerated since, the 1950s, and you had a job for life kind of thing. But now people feel and are more disposable, and I think people are realizing how replaceable they are, and how insecure the actual employee-employer relationship sort of is,
And Lyndall, it's so on the money. Because my story of it was unrequited love.
Yeah.
It was that thing of like, I thought you wanted to marry me. I thought you wanted to spend the rest of your life with me. I thought that I was the only one and I was irreplaceable. And the reality was, no, that's not how we felt about you. That's not. And again, I want to say this. It was one of the best things that could have ever happened to me, because it opened my eyes that, like, Eric, you're not supposed to put that much weight on their shoulders. It's not theirs to carry, But anyway,
So
go ahead.
All of this to say that people realizing this, and they're realizing this sort of as they get to the middle of their career, actually, right? But it's been accelerated by all of the kind of triggers and factors we've been talking about. But at the same time, this is why people want to take a step back and go, well, hang on, I think I've been plowing way too much time and energy and too much of myself into this unrequited love. I think I need to take myself back again,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the one thing I have to say is, there's lots of different ways and that people might go about doing that, right? I am not at all saying a sabbatical is the only way, but what I'm saying is I have always just found it really hard to decompress, come back to myself, and extricate myself from the environment that has been having me sort of wound up, to unwind myself from that environment whilst still in the environment, to me seems impossible. I mean, I've never been able to do that. And so I have to step out of the environment, aka sabbatical, to be able to then look at the environment and go, that seemed pretty unhealthy. I definitely needed to leave that.
Right. And do you find, Lyndall, my gut says that you probably have experienced this with a client or two, where the fear of the unknown is greater than that fear or anxiety of staying where they're at.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
I absolutely do. And I experience this all the time with clients, and I've experienced it myself in my own sabbatical.
Right.
There's a tipping point, and I see it. You almost see it in a client's eyes. You can almost see it the moment it occurs. And that is when the fear of staying put becomes more than the fear of uncertainty. So, like, the uncertainty, stepping into uncertainty and the unknown, becomes the lesser evil of just staying doing what they're doing, because they can see that this path that they're on is leading down a really dark track. And suddenly the fear of just going on down that dark path becomes greater than the fear of stepping off the path. And that is the tipping point of the shift, where taking the sabbatical becomes less scary than not taking it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's something to this idea of being able to give yourself the margin to be able to step away, right? Because in our world, in the work that we do, we kind of taken the approach of, we'll meet you where you're at to help you with this thing called emotional intelligence. However, I typically will always give a bit of that sort of the disclaimer, the warning label. The most optimal way to build a practice around EQ is in a place where you are not being pulled in multiple directions at the same time, on and on and on. And ideally, Lyndall, I haven't said this to you, but ideally, it's people who are in sabbatical that would get the most out of emotional intelligence work. And it maybe makes total sense, right? It's kind of like, well, I'm not pressed. I can actually focus on me and focus on learning, focus on and on. So it's almost, I say it this way because I will work with you wherever you're at. But you need to understand, you have to kind of, that strategy again, me coming and doing a 2-hour workshop is not as effective as me coming alongside of you for a year. And I get it. Some people can't afford a year. Some people can only afford a public workshop that has been, designed with sort of high level, content. I think, and I'm heading toward this idea about the employer. It's so encouraging to hear that there is more of an adoption of this, because from an economic standpoint, you said what you said earlier, and I agree. Not everyone has the means and the wherewithal to do what maybe your example with the client was able to do. So Lyndall, if you were talking, and I'm sure in our audience we have some owners and CEOs and all that good stuff, what would you say is the benefit for their company? If they're out there going, okay, great, I'm glad that Eric has discovered Eric again, but what's in it for us, the company?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really important discussion that company leaders need to have, right? So first of all, I think a company leader needs to ask themselves, what is the cost of burnout, right? So if somebody has to go on medical leave, or if somebody is like abruptly leaving, the company, what is the disruption and the cost of that to the? I mean, it's a lot, right? The number is obviously going to change, but it's incredibly disruptive, and it's absolutely not an optimal way of running a business, right? So again, back to the what would you do if I gave you 2 years and you had to take 3 months off kind of analogy. It's the same thing. What would you prefer? Would you prefer to just work your employees to the point of burnout and then they abruptly leave? Or do you want to recognize burnout and put in preventative programs like a sabbatical program that allows you to allow them to return to the workforce recharged and healthy with a good outlook, right? So there's the well-being kind of burnout angle.
Yeah.
A lot of the companies that I work with, because I also consult to companies on how to build, and amplify sabbatical programs, they're working with an aging workforce who are close to retirement, right? And the people who are around retirement age, that generation, are incredibly fearful in many cases around retirement. And at the same time, there's a huge sort of succession planning critical mission that a company needs to do to prepare for their senior leaders kind of retiring, so passing the baton on. So with some of the companies that I work with, we've been using a sabbatical program for their leadership teams or their executive level to help smooth that transition into retirement. So it's this wonderful practice mini retirement. The leader gets to try on retirement and sort of start figuring out who they want to be and what kind of life they want to live in retirement. And then they return to the workforce and they've got some more time to set things up, like they want to go into teaching positions or board positions or whatever it is, so that once they get to retirement, those things are set up and they're ready to go, right? They don't just get to retirement and then there's nothing, right? Because it takes time to get a teaching position or get a board position in place, right? So they've got that beautiful, smooth sort of shift into retirement. But then at the same time, what the company is getting is this practice of what a succession plan might look like. So they get to try the new leaders coming up. The new leaders get this wonderful exposure and opportunity to step up, take new opportunity, prove that they're ready for that new promotion, and try on what it's like to be in this role, and at the same time, from client's perspective, the client is getting access to more people in the company, and there's deeper client relationships by simply just having different contact points between the client and the firm, right? So there's all sorts of different reasons that companies kind of want to do this. In the tech space, it's absolutely around attraction and retention of people as well, particularly maybe not for the big tech firms, but for the little tech firms who are trying to hire talent in very competitive niches. Having something like a 2-month sabbatical program, maybe a paid sabbatical, I mean, that's a huge perk to offer your employees, right? And one that the younger generations who are coming up through tech really value. We know that. I've a survey the other day said 71% of people would take a sabbatical if their company offered it, right? And so there's the attraction piece, but also the retention piece. Is not just about burnout, but it's about, giving people reasons to stay, right? And so if you cleverly craft your sabbatical program and the policy around it, you can craft your the tenure that somebody needs to have been with the company, the length of service somebody needs to be with the company for, at sort of natural exit points, right? So if you feel like there's a churn point in some place in your workforce and you want people to sort of stay for a bit longer, you offer the sabbatical just before the churn point, right? And so they are holding on to stay and take the sabbatical and then returning again refreshed and ready to go for the next chapter. So you're not losing people.
Interesting. That is so powerful. I think about specifically some person in my family who is very successful, very good at what they do, and they work for a large organization that's just, it's like they are just plowing the field, and there's no thought. It's just, once we plow this field, we're going to the next field and then the next field. It's just, everything is just, we're just plowing. And he's at a point where the thought is, well, hold on a second. I don't want to just mindlessly plow fields and just, and I think about that, your distinction about maybe the smaller mid-size tech company who realizes that this is a pathway to burnout. We want to offer something that is unique, because I would imagine it's a differentiator, right? And it places people because I think, Lyndall, our audience realizes that neither of us are saying, oh, corporations are bad and companies are wrong. We've got to, no, it's not that at all. We're just kind of wanting to introduce humanity a bit into how we get on with this thing called work, right? I got to segue a bit, because I'm thinking about maybe the most important part of our world, meaning our individual lives, and that's family. I know from experience of what it's like to crash and burn at, my family being healthy as I'm going through a transition. So what are the benefits for a family, potentially, from the individual taking a sabbatical?
The answer to that is so simple. Quality time. It's as simple as that. Quality time. In the pace that we live and work at, the amount of time, but also the quality of that time in its ability to connect and build relationships and share experiences and make memories, that time is just not there. And a sabbatical gives you time back to be able to plow it into memory making instead of plowing it into work, right? Yeah. And it's about giving yourself time with the people that you love to do the things that you love. And they are the moments that you will remember for the rest of your life.
And Lyndall, you said something. I saw this interview. Once again, my memory failing. I don't remember who it was with, but they were talking about the tendency for taking things for granted. It kind of occurs when we are finding ourselves in this sort of mindless rinse and repeat mode. Yeah. And I'm almost, and for our audience, no, Lyndall has not hired me as her marketing representative. But what I'm about to say, this is what I love about your work, because it is a very strategic way to get out of the maybe take it for granted mode that occurred. Because we've heard this before, right? When people go, I don't know where the 10 years went. It just flew by.
Can I tell you another story?
Oh, please. Yeah.
So another one of my clients, they're on sabbatical right now, actually, and it's a family. It's a family, and the husband is working in a fast-paced startup world.
Yeah.
The wife has got her own business, and they've got I want to say it's like a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, or a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. It's like those ages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were recognizing that they didn't have time for each other, right? The husband and wife in their relationship, they were just running it. And they didn't have time with their kids to be the kinds of parents that they wanted to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it was also the recognition that their kids were only going to be these ages for a tiny little slither of time in their whole life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they needed and really wanted to make use of that time to not just have time together, but to create this amazing family experience, these amazing memories. So they've literally taken a year off, right? So this is the other end of the spectrum.
Oh, sure. Right.
They're traveling the world, and they're doing like 3 months in a different continent. They've just finished their European part, and now they're in Bali, and it's been just absolutely filled with experiences. But it's not just about the traveling, right? It's not for them. It's not just we're going to go and travel. We started working together before their sabbatical, so we got super crystal clear on what it is that was important for their family, right? And what they wanted for their kids was that they wanted their kids to grow in compassion and empathy and emotional intelligence through giving them these worldly experiences. But what they wanted to do was not necessarily always have those experiences be comfortable or and I have to remember, one of the things that they said was that they wanted to have experiences and allow their children to embrace the good, the bad, and the boring. They wanted their kids to be bored.
Wow.
And to learn everything that you can learn from being bored, Yeah. And
I have to go. That's such a great story. And I always try to put especially in our show with the diversity of our audience. So if out there, Lyndall, there's someone that says, hey, I get it. I like this idea, this sabbatical thing. Wow, this is really, but hey, Lyndall, I can't take off a year and I can't take off 3 months. I might be able to pull off a month. Is that okay? What do you say to that person?
Is that okay? Of course it's okay.
Awesome. Okay. Right.
you have any and all permission granted to give yourself a break, whatever that looks like for you. Right. And if it's a month, great, make that happen. If you can challenge yourself and make that a little bit longer, great, do that,
Right.
And obviously we're talking about people working with me in my one-on-one coaching program, but not everybody can afford that. So great. I also have a sabbatical and career break community that is just a low monthly access fee that people can get classes and courses and self-paced learning, and they get drop-in coaching with me and my business partner, and we get community calls, and we have an entire resource library, right? So there's whilst I work in this really deep kind of one-on-one, relationship with some of my coaching clients, there's also so much support that's available for people that can't afford that either, right? Because I'm going to say something like anti my own marketing.
I've done that before.
It's like, if you can't afford to take a break, right, and you're choosing between, taking a break or hiring a coach, I want you to take the break. Don't hire the coach. Don't hire me as a coach.
Right.
If you really can't, basically. So let's say, you can, you want to take a break. You can maybe only make 1 or 2 months. You're not in the place to afford a coach. That's fine. Join something like Breakspace, which is our community. It's completely affordable. You're not going to get that deep personal one-on-one time with a coach, but you're going to get the support of all of the other people on the same journey. And you've got all of the self-paced learning and the resources and the course. There's so much there, for anyone. So there's ways to get support, and I want you to get that support. That's why we built the community. And, so don't think that in order to make the most of a sabbatical, you have to work with a coach. I do want you to get support, but there's very affordable options for that as well.
And that's awesome, Lyndall. And for our audience, as always, we'll have in the show notes ways in which you can join that community, as well as get more information on Lyndall. And I guess, Lyndall, as we're kind of getting toward the end of our time together here today, and which I hope you'll come back, because I still have some other things I wanted to talk about.
Sure.
It's been great. I guess when I'm so encouraged that people might today go, wow, when I saw this at the beginning, I'm thinking, I can't do that. That maybe now they're kind of going, well, maybe I can do this, right?
Yeah.
What would you say, I mean, I guess from a societal perspective, right? Let's just kind of look at it from that. And I know you're in Europe and I'm in the United States and all. What do you think is maybe one benefit for society, for the community, world community, when people are taking sabbaticals?
Yeah. If we step back, right, and we look at the way things are heading with the pace and pressures of work, right? Yeah. We're basically creating a workforce that is stuck on a hamster wheel, completely blind focused, just working into a hole, right? Kind of just the direction that work is going at the moment, right? So would you rather that workforce, right? Or would you rather the workforce that's able to strategically plan and prepare for short breaks from work every few years, every 5 to 7 years, right? Yep. Where they step out, they recharge, they develop their EQ, they develop their sense of self, they develop a plan for the future, they develop career skills, whatever it is that they want to do in that time. And then they step back into the workforce as whole, creative, unblinkered, productive people in the workforce. I mean, that workforce is the one that I want for the future, right?
Yeah.
Not the robots.
And you know what? And again, I'm such a bad host today, because this is one of the things I want to talk to you the next time, but I got to bring it up. I have to bring it up. I think there's also, I would ask that employer, that, government entity, whatever it may be, do you really think you have enough money to pay for the healthcare cost of the robot version?
Yeah.
Because Lyndall, as I know, we haven't talked about metabolic health. We haven't talked about the impact of burnout, the stress, the cortisol. Yeah. So on that point, let's pick it up there when you come back, because I do think that's vitally important, near and dear to my heart. I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. It's been awesome. It's been awesome.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks.
And everyone out there, as you could tell in my voice, this has just been a great episode. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. And we look forward to the next time that we're together. Take care.
Hi, everyone. This is Eric Pennington with the Spirit of EQ. I'm not introducing a new episode today. I'm here to tell you some things that might help you. Jeff, you're with me as always. So
Yes.
How do people get in touch with us?
Well, the best way is just send us an email at info@spiritofeq.com.
That's awesome. Jeff, I was also thinking about reviews, and I'm notoriously bad at asking for them, so reviews on all of the platforms wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes.
Do you think that'd be good?
I think that would be great because, one, that will help us learn how to make better ones. And it's always good for us
So
to hear.
we're not the perfect podcast hosts?
We're close.
Okay, all
But-
right.
but not-
still,
not totally
we want your
perfect.
feedback. We want your feedback.
But it also might let us know a new subject. Hey, we need to dig deeper into that.
Yeah.
So let us know what you think.
Cool. We really appreciate that. As always, too, there is social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we also have a YouTube channel. Those also have mechanisms or options for you to be able to leave a comment, a like, or those kind of things. Just want to make sure that you know how to get in touch with us. Right, Jeff?
Right. We appreciate you all.
Thank you. Once again, we really appreciate you tuning in today. One of the things that Jeff and I want to bring to your attention as well is that when we created this podcast, it was not intended to take the place of a clinician. In other words, if you find yourself in a place where there's something deeper going on or something that you cannot solve on your own, we do recommend that you reach out to a clinician of some sort. This podcast is purely opinion-based, and it is rooted in the desire to help you along your path in whatever way we can. However, it is never going to replace, nor should it ever be looked at as a replacement for clinical help in any way. Thanks again for tuning in.